A report today suggests that Rachel Reeves will get significantly less money from a clampdown on non-dom inheritance tax and all these tax fiddles, because people will simply go abroad, and this is an unknown amount of money which could be raised. It sounds egalitarian, it sounds ideological, but in the end, it's not going to raise as much as Labour thinks. And together with the tax, adding VAT on private schools, what has already happened is that parents are voting with their feet and pulling out of private education. Now, you might say ideologically that's the right thing to do, and I would certainly caution many people against selecting private education, particularly in the sixth form, because it comes with penalties that the top universities are biased against people who have come up through private education. But, and of course, many private schools do not guarantee an excellent exam turnover. Quite the opposite. And I've talked to many students and parents who have pulled their children out of senior private schools, schools like Harrow, because the schools simply aren't prepared to help the children realise their own potential, and in fact are offering UCAS predictions which are well below what they were capable of getting. They pulled out of these schools and they actually achieved what they planned to achieve in the first place, which was a batch of A+ grades, which in some of these cases meant that they did get into the top universities. That was despite the efforts of schools like Harrow, the top schools in the country. And I'm thinking of very specific examples. These schools were not set up to produce great A-level and GCSE or O-level or even international baccalaureate results. The school just down the road from me, Rugby School, has started teaching the IB. The IB is notoriously difficult to teach and very difficult for students to do well in, particularly in a school which has only just started doing it. Schools need quite a history of teaching the IB before they can be sure they're going to be successful. And the IB sounds it sounds very egalitarian, but in practice, it's just a slightly wider A-level. No, and I'm saying that as somebody who's taught A-level and IB and GCSE and in the past O-level. I've taught the range of school exams, and I've also presided over university entrance, and I've taught a range of subjects. So I think I have a certain perspective on this subject, and I've taught in private and in state schools. And I don't see that private schools, for the most part, offer anything that is an advantage if we're looking at exam results and university entrance. There we are. I've said it. I think private schools and boarding schools particularly offer an environment where students can mature and establish some sort of personal identity in a way that perhaps is harder in a state school system. I think it's also possible that the equipment and the facilities in some private schools, certainly not all, are better than in some state schools, but a good state school offers significantly more opportunities. I'm thinking of some of the major scoring state schools in, for example, Cambridge. I'm thinking of the grammar school down the road in Rugby, and so on. These are spectacular schools with a spectacular wealth of results. And what's going to happen? What's going to happen if more parents desert the private education? Not only is it possible that some of these minor private schools are going to collapse, many of them are on the edge of collapse anyway. I know a few that are teetering on the brink. And that will mean a wave of students going into state education, which simply isn't ready for that. But equally, if more parents stop going to stop going to private schools, that extra funding from charging them VAT simply will not materialize. That huge revenue simply will not be there. And there won't be the extra money to bulk up the state schools as is expected. And more than that, the state schools will have to be finding more resources to support the greater number of pupils coming in. I think this is a mistaken aim, and I think the tax crackdown is a mistaken aim. Now, on an ideological front, the tax crackdown is absolutely right. But assuming your ideology is going to produce money is a fake assumption. And Labour's plans that its costings are rigorous are plans based on people doing the same thing next year that they're doing this year, and that's not the case. People are already moving. And because Jeremy Hunt abolished the non-dom status in his March budget, picking up a Labour policy, that already blunts the instrument. And yes, there are loopholes in the Jeremy Hunt system, but Reeves is going to find it very difficult to crack down more ardently on the non-dom loopholes than she would have done had she been pushing that agenda from the very beginning in a fresh wave, in a fresh assault. Labour is going to find that it has at least a 1.6 billion black hole, according to a current Conservative Treasury costing, and it's not going to be able to plug that hole. It's going to get bigger as people move, and more than that, I think, particularly when it comes to the private education thing, you're going to see a lot of middle-class people moving homes to fit into the better school catchment area, which is, again, going to push poorer families out into the sticks and towards those poorer performing schools. The better option is to rethink our education system, to rethink the training of our teachers. It's a longer option, but it's an option that is inevitable in the long term, certainly in the next 20 years, and Labour would be better seizing that moment now, carpe diem, as Robin Williams would have said, and recognising that education itself must change. This conveyor belt of this Ford conveyor belt where subjects are only taught to a particular standard and then are measured against what we need in our society. This is changing. What we need to do actually is far less of the utilitarian subjects like the sciences and those core subjects which are promoted at the moment, And we need to be educating people who are more adaptable, which means that they need to have clear mathematical skills and clear skills in critical thinking. I think there's a lot to be said for taking students back to the thrill of a classical education, which at least develops the mind, develops the memory, because the memory is the thing which is so challenged by a computer age, because students, in my experience, many students simply do not learn. They do not memorize. Those who do stand out in a way that is phenomenal. Those students who are studying Shakespeare, for example, who sit down and learn all the main soliloquies. I know some students who are doing GCSE this year, and some of them have sat down and learned all the Macbeth soliloquies, and I think, my goodness, that's impressive. And because they have had a background in mostly foreign languages, they find that easy. And yet the majority of students that I've taught find it difficult even to get to the end of the play. Now, those people who have those memory tricks have an advantage. And that comes from foreign languages, from classics, and so on. It comes from learning things at a very young age. It comes from having a musical background, from learning where the notes are on the piano or the violin or the cello or whatever. And the students who are doing that routinely at a young age are in China, not in the UK. We think that learning a language is something you do when you're 12, when you're 13, when you've got a choice in secondary school. We think that picking up a musical instrument is something you do when you're 6, 7, or maybe 9. The Chinese students are doing this at the age of 4 and earlier. They are automatically learning more than 2 languages when they're learning how to speak. These things are training the brain and the memory, and we are behind the curve. And, of course, if the predictions are to be believed from the University of Warwick, there's a fellow called Aaron Advani and others, these predictions of doom about Rachel Reeves' plans and about the way that events are getting in her path, we are behind the curve, and we are going to be without money. We were going to be underfunded. Not a good look.